It's a cold, chilly day today, and thank all of you for braving with the weather and coming out to hear our program today. Excellent turnout. This should be an excellent program today. We want to welcome everyone to our February City Club program. First, we want to thank our sponsors who make a lot of this possible. We especially want to acknowledge 5 new sponsors who just joined us this month. Big Sky Public Relations, YWCA of Missoula, St. Patrick Hospital, Glacier Country, Montana, and Missoula Housing Authority. Thank you very much. On your tables, you'll notice some little slips of paper that say membership. If you are not a member, normally membership is $50 a year, but if you sign up today, it's only $35 for your first year. So if you're not a member, please sign up, put your email down. You'll receive email notices. You'll be able to get a discount on the meals when you attend the program, and it helps us communicate better with you. So sincerely think of signing up and becoming a member. The program today is very simple. After President Bodnar speaks, we're going to have table talk. Think of questions during the presentation, and then during table talk, each of you are going to talk to your various partners at the table, and you're going to come up with one question to ask. And then our people with microphones will come around, and you get to stand up and ask the president a question. I'm now going to turn this over to Peggy Kaur. Peggy is going to introduce today's speaker.
Hello and welcome. If you need to know just a few things about our featured speaker today, I'm going to paint a portrait by the numbers. We'll start with the number 2. He is the son of 2 educators. 1, he graduated first in his class from West Point with a degree in economics. We'll go back to number 2. He was honored with both the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship and the Truman Scholarship. Another 2. He earned 2 Masters of Science degrees from the University of Oxford, one in comparative social policy and one in economic and social history. 101. Before serving on the faculty at West Point, he served in the 101st Airborne Division and the U.S. Army's 1st Special Forces Group. Our speaker, as a member of the Army's Green Berets, commanded a Special Forces detachment on multiple deployments, and later served as a special assistant to the commanding general in Iraq, among other duties. Now, almost too many numbers to count. Our speaker came here from a career at General Electric Company, where he was responsible for long-term strategy and business transformation at GE Transportation, around 10,000 employees globally. And there are many more important numbers, but let's just add these, for I think they may be the most important to him right now and to us. 3, he and his wife Chelsea have 3 children. Finally, 19 and number 2. 19, he is our 19th president of the University of Montana, and as in month number 2 on campus. So please join me in welcoming President Seth Bodnar to Missoula, to City Club, and to the university.
All right. Are we? Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Good. It is an incredible honor for me to be here with this group. There's one. We're going to have counting how many technical difficulties we may or may not have. We're going to try, right? Because they inevitably happen. It's one of the old jokes in the Army. There's 3 things certain in life, right? You know, death, taxes, and your communications will fail, right, at some point. So our presentation will have some glitch at some point. But I appreciate everybody being here this afternoon. It is so great to have a city like Missoula and a university like the University of Montana that are just so inextricably linked. You know, I've said multiple times, and I don't know who said this first, but you know, there's an old saying that says if you want a great city, build a university and wait 100 years. So we are in our 125th year with the University of Montana. Actually, we'll celebrate our 125th birthday this Thursday with our Charter Day events. We'll have some great fireworks there. I hope everyone can come attend. But this university and this city, which is great well before 25 years ago, are just, I think, so, like I said, inextricably linked, and it's so inspiring for me to see the support of this community for this university. And so thank you for being here, but more importantly, thank you for supporting this university, and most importantly, the young women and men, and women and men of all ages that come through this university every year. It is such a great environment, such a great place for people to not just have an education within the classroom, but have the richness of this community that makes the experience at the University of Montana so special. So what I thought I'd do today is talk a little bit about the context of not just our world today, or excuse me, not just higher ed today, but more broadly speaking, our world. We live in a pretty complex and dynamic world. And I think this page, I could probably speak for 20 minutes just on this page in the saying here, right? You see a young person looking out not just across the university, but the city of Missoula, and the statement that leaders will rise. Right? So we live in a very complex, a very dynamic world, a world in which the students that are entering our university, by many estimates, right? And you could find different sources with different estimates, but by many estimates, 15 years from now, half the jobs that will be available to the students coming through this university don't yet exist today. So how do you prepare students for the challenges that they may face when you don't yet really know what they are? And I think the University of Montana, it's one of the reasons I'm so excited, is that the University of Montana does that really well. And we have the right ingredients for what I believe the world needs of a state flagship research university today. And so I start by saying, look, a little bit more about our world today and why I think it needs excellent universities more than ever. Just this a grouping of pictures, right? On the left is showing a graphical representation of Moore's Law. Right? Many are familiar with Moore's Law, which is the number of transistors that you can fit in an area will double. I believe it's every 10 years, and it's held pretty true. And the advances in computing power that we're seeing, the change in technology that we're seeing in today's world is really rapid. You're seeing pretty significant advances in artificial intelligence. One of the pictures you see here is of Watson beating Ken Jensen in Jeopardy. You're seeing pictures of 3 companies right there. I've heard it said, many have said that, look, the largest taxi company in the world today owns no vehicles, right? The largest accommodations provider in the world today owns no real estate. The largest media company in the world today, or one of the most impactful, maybe not the largest, but most impactful, creates no content, Facebook. So this is a world full of disruption. This is a world in which students have to adapt. They have to innovate. All of us have to continually do that. It's also a world where we're seeing the level of not just value, respect, but the perceptions of higher ed, I think, frighteningly diminishing somewhat. I have a picture of a survey from last fall in terms of the perceptions overall of not just the value of and the return on investment in higher education, but the value of higher education in society. A lot of people have a diminishing view of that, and I think that is a very frightening thing, to be frank with you, because whether you look at it from a pure return on investment standpoint, the value of a higher education to people today, the numbers speak for themselves. The lifetime earnings differential is very, very different. But more broadly than that, the value of higher education and the value of institutions like the University of Montana in shaping informed, educated citizens in providing a place for free, informed, respectful exchange of ideas is, I would argue, more important today than ever. You know, we see some images of sides squaring off, right? Whether that's in Charlottesville, whether that's at the University of Florida, whether you see that, you know, all across the country, the level of civic discourse in our nation right now is, I think, at a frightening low level. And I think universities play a key role, not just in shaping citizens to engage in a more productive debate, but being a place that encourages that fosters that. So I think universities today, as I said, are more important than they've ever been. And I say that not having spent my career in the academic world, but I say that as someone who believes that, look, this is the most important thing I've ever done in my life, by far, right? Not just for the people that are passionate about this university, for our alums, for our students, but for the role that this university plays, not just in this community, but in this state and for this nation. So this, to me, is something I'm incredibly excited to be doing here together with you, because I've seen this firsthand through my career. You know, I'm up here wearing a suit today. I'm not used to, I mean, I was trying to maybe not wear a suit every day, but I'm finding I have to wear a suit pretty much every day. But 11 years ago, this is what I was wearing. This was me with two Filipino Marine colonels. We were on a small jungle island, almost right between the Philippines and Indonesia. I was leading a special forces team. I was living in a grass hut on this idyllic island right on the beach. Now, if I went outside our little camp, there was some characters that I wouldn't, and none of us would want to run into on a dark alley. But our mission was, simply put, this was what they call ungoverned space. You know, part of the 9/11 attacks were planned in this area, the Bali bombing, and my team's mission and my mission was, hey, make this place stable. Tell us how that goes. Come back in 6 months. And, you know, 10 years before that, I had entered West Point. I had entered West Point, which at its core is a liberal arts institution with, you know, a strong military training component. But my training was in, from a military standpoint, was in combating heavily armored forces, right? Soviet-style forces on the plains of Europe, right? Speed, firepower, maneuver. That's what we learned in our tactics classes. But here I was with this very vague, very ambiguous mission. I had to adapt. I had to learn. But this wasn't just my story. This was, frankly, the whole military story. Those of you remember the beginning of the Iraq invasion in 2003, what was called the shock and awe campaign. U.S. forces, capitalizing on their strengths of firepower, maneuver, swept across the country of Iraq, toppled statues, removed the government of Saddam Hussein, and all peace broke out. Except that didn't happen, right? As they say in the military, the enemy gets a vote. And in this case, it wasn't really even clear who the enemy was. I got to Iraq. I had went the interesting path of going from Oxford with a short trip and stop in Fort Benning, and went from Oxford to Iraq. I joined the 101st Airborne Division in late 2003, and was in the midst of a very confusing and very dynamic situation. We didn't really know what we were doing. We had to figure it out, and it took some time for the U.S. military to adapt. And what we learned was, look, you have to change how you operate. You have to change how your organization tries to apply its strengths to the situation in which it finds itself. So this was an organization in which our tankers would brag about being able to destroy an Iraqi tank before that tank could even see them. I mean, that's great, totally irrelevant in this situation. So we had to write a new playbook, right? They came out with a counterinsurgency manual. Actually, it was a New York Times bestseller, interestingly. Probably the only military manual ever to be a New York Times bestseller. And what we realized was that look, this whole idea of key terrain, the idea in military jargon, typically it's key terrain, and if you seize this terrain, you can dominate, you win. The key terrain in this case was the Iraqi people. That was a key insight for the US military. And what happened over time, this chart on the right, I had the opportunity then 6 years later to work with the commanding general there, and this chart on the right-hand side is what was affectionately called the Virginia chart. You can see why. Looks like the state of Virginia. But what this chart shows is just as important as what it doesn't show. Those of you who remember Vietnam, you'd see on the nightly news, and I didn't, to be frank, but body counts, right? We win by killing the enemy. What this chart shows is not how many enemy the US military had killed. This was number of security incidents, not just on US forces, but on the Iraqi people across the country. And you can see what happened, a huge spike, as Iraq went through basically a civil war. And then as the United States implemented what was called the surge, right? Put more forces there, but more importantly, got off large bases. Said, you can't operate from large bases and expect you're going to go out and do these missions and secure the Iraqi people. You have to live in the towns. You have to think and work with the Iraqi people to solve these problems, address these security issues together. Total change in how a large organization operated. Now, Iraq is still a very complex, very difficult situation. Some of the underlying drivers of that conflict have still not been resolved. And frankly, we will debate for centuries the wisdom or not of the US engaging in that. My point in showing this is just to articulate the need for organizational change, the need for adaptation, the need for innovation that many large industries, many large organizations are going through. And I saw this in the military, I saw this in the private sector. Now here's a quiz. Maybe we'll, when you're teaching, I think they always say, have intermittent discussions. Can anybody tell me the significance of the date on this chart and the logos on this chart?
The Dow.
What? Who said that? Oh yeah.
The Dow.
Yes. This was on May 26, 1896, when the Dow Jones Industrial Average was first calculated. These were the 12 companies that formed the basis of that index. And I always used to show this chart when I worked at GE. And to our employees, because it's pretty interesting, right? And some of the names are kind of fun, right? The National Lead Company, the American Sugar Company, the Distilling and Cattle Feeding Company, and I think the American Cotton Oil Company is one of the more interesting ones. But the logo you see on there is GE, right? The one that's still there, but that's a company that's having to adapt and change quite a bit. And at this point, we're going to see our technology if it really works. All right, yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Proud of you, son. GE. Manufacturer.
Well, that's why I dug this out for you. It's your grandpappy's hammer, and he would have wanted you to have it.
Meant a lot to him.
Yes, GE makes powerful machines, but I'll be writing the code that will allow those machines to share information with each other. I'll be changing the way the
You
world.
can't pick it up, can you?
Go ahead. You can't lift the hammer.
It's okay, though. You're going to change the world.
So this is something that GE said, hey, we've been around 125 years. We have to adapt. We have to learn. We have to make software just as important as hardware. We have to be an industrial company that competes effectively with digital companies. And so this was one of the missions I was given. Hey, you're a locomotive product manager. You've run these signaling projects. Try to start a software business within this big rail operation. Sell software to, and we had some good products, but we had to bring that together. We had to say, all right, how do our customers think? How do we best serve them? And frankly, this story, again, is still being written. The companies within, the businesses within GE are doing pretty well, but the company itself and how it operates is really wrestling through a lot of adversity. And so I tell these stories not to necessarily, do case studies on organizational change, but just to articulate that This is a really interesting time in many different industries, and I think in particular for the University of Montana. So the University of Montana, as I've said, I believe is facing a defining moment. You know, we have been, we've seen enrollment declines, we've seen struggles, we've seen some of the budget challenges that come from those enrollment declines. And this is a time when we as a community are pulling together to chart the course ahead for this great institution. And I think the good news, the thing that I'm most excited about as I join this institution in this defining moment is we have all the right ingredients at the University of Montana for what I believe students need to be successful in this world that I've just given you a little bit of context for from where I sit. You know, we have terrific sciences at the University of Montana. Now, those of you who have heard me talk have heard me brag about our scientists quite a bit, but that's part of my job. A big part of my job is to brag about the terrific faculty that we have at the University of Montana. And in sciences in particular, many of you saw the report from a few weeks ago where the top 1% of the most influential scientists in the world were identified. And influence in science is measured by the number of people who cite your work. We had 3 scientists in that top 1% in Montana. All 3 of them with UM, teaching at UM, adjuncts at UM, who our students are having the chance to work with them every single day. We have the best placement of students into medical school at the University of Montana. We last year got almost two-thirds of the WWAMI applicants. We have terrific sciences at the University of Montana. But we also have wonderful arts and humanities. You can see a picture of one of our Emmy award-winning teams there on the screen. You know, whether it's in the pure arts or in social sciences and humanities, this is a place where the University of Montana truly excels. In our professional schools, frankly, I'd put our professional schools, whether it's our business school, our law school, our school of pharmacy, journalism, I'd put that mix of professional schools up against any institution in this region. And I think the beauty of a UM education is what I'm calling the power of the and. You know, what we've talked about is saying, you know what? This idea of, well, is it STEM or humanities and arts or professional schools? The power is really in the and. Because if you're going to succeed in this world that we've just talked about, you have to be able to work across disciplines. You have to be an agile, lifelong learner who can solve complex challenges at the intersection of disciplines. There was no course I could take at West Point or in Oxford to train me how to actually go into a small jungle island in the Philippines and think holistically about the security and development of that place. There's no course I could take to say, okay, you're a big industrial company, how do you build a software company? Those are my experiences, but those experiences are across this room and across our alumni base. And I'm not the only one who's saying this. You know, this is a hard chart to read, but man, there's just so much good information on it, I couldn't resist saying it. I'll explain it though. The left side is a recent book published by the president of Microsoft together with their head of artificial intelligence. Very timely, last month, called The Future Computed, talks about the impact of artificial intelligence on the world. And in many different ways, societal impacts. But they talk a little bit about education. And I think this point is really interesting because I'll just read it. It says, as computers behave more like humans, the social sciences and humanities will become even more important. Languages, art, history, economics, ethics, philosophy, psychology, and human development courses basically says are instrumental in shaping students for this AI-powered world. So it's not that STEM is not important. You need STEM, and we have great STEM at the University of Montana. It's important, but it's not sufficient. And that's where UM excels. This other study just came out in the National Bureau of Economic Research's journal, which I'm sure a lot of people in this room read diligently every month. But it's basically saying, why are social skills so valued in the market? You look at, and it's because people are still much better at open-ended tasks, requiring flexibility, creativity, and judgment. And it shows a chart of the jobs that are in the most demand over the past period of time. And these are the jobs for which UM is uniquely preparing students. So we got a great story. You should be very proud of your university, okay? Because it is your university. And I see it, you see it all the time in our graduates. So this is one of the fun parts of my job is I get to go out and talk to alums, I get to read about alums, I get to hear their stories. I've been showing this picture. I could pick 30 other alums to show on this. I could pick 1,000 other alums to show on this. But Emily Grassley, I'll just take. Emily was one of our grads in media and visual arts, and or studio art, I guess. And she is now the chief curiosity correspondent for the Chicago Field Museum. So those who we lived in Chicago before we came here, the Field Museum is the equivalent of the Museum of Natural History. Emily's working there making science accessible to the world. Right? And that's not happening in spite of her UM education. That's happening because of her UM education. You look at somebody like Dorothy Bridges, a BA in liberal arts, now a senior vice president at the Federal Reserve. Or one of our former geology majors, now this state's attorney general. Right? Or Eric Sprunk, the COO of one of this country's most iconic and innovative companies, Nike. So these alums exemplify what makes UM so great, what makes UM so special. So I come into this role, and I'm a month in, I come into it with an enormous sense of responsibility, of awe at this great university, but with incredible excitement about the path ahead. So where am I focused? I'm focused really in 4 areas, right? I wouldn't call these necessarily the specific university priorities, but these are the things that I'm focused on personally as we move forward together at the University of Montana. And the first is pursuing excellence and innovation. And so one of the things that we talked about in my campus forums, I guess now 2 weeks ago, is that excellence, it's not an accident, right? You don't happen upon excellence by chance. You don't sustain excellence without work. Excellence takes understanding and emphasizing your strengths, saying this is what we're going to be great at. Maybe this isn't what we're going to do, right? And that's why it requires a disciplined focus on where you're going to drive excellence, how your budgeting process is going to support that. It also requires you to continually seek a better way. Say, you know what, this is the way we've done things in the past, but is there a better way we could do it moving forward? And continually assessing how you're doing in a data-driven, objective way, and adjusting, pivoting, making tweaks as you implement your institution's vision. So, the mission that we have at the University of Montana is too important to do anything but seek excellence. Because we are about shaping agile, creative, lifelong learners, but we're also about fostering social mobility and innovation. Right? This is a university, we're not going to brag to you that we only select 5% of our applicants and wear that as a badge of honor. That's not what the University of Montana is here to do. The University of Montana is here to serve the state and the people of the people of Montana and provide opportunity. Sometimes for students who maybe aren't college ready, who maybe haven't had opportunity before. Our job is to enable success, enable social mobility, and also to advance the frontiers of knowledge, right? To enrich this community and tackle some of our society's most challenging problems. So what we're doing is so important that we have to be clear about where we're going to focus. We have to be intentional. We have to be bold. And we're going to do that. As some of you may have heard, we will be reconstituting what's called the University Planning Committee, building upon a lot of the work that's been done. And over the coming months, crystallizing around a strategic plan of action, where we're going to focus, where we're going to be driving excellence moving forward. We're doing that together as a community. This is not my job, right? This is our community's job, our campus community. So we're doing that together. The second area that I'm really focusing on is stewardship and sustainability. In this picture, Shauna, one of our great graphic designers, helped us to just show illustrate that we at the university, we in this community are just one link in a chain. You know, a chain that extends 125 years back to when this university was chartered, but even beyond that, to when the Salish peoples were there before. We have a legacy to build upon, and we have an obligation to build on that legacy in a positive way. Just as important is building and creating a vibrant organization for those yet to come. And when you look at where we are from a budget standpoint right now, we do have what's called a structural deficit, right? That means our operating revenues, our operating expenses are not in balance where they should be. That's not a crisis, but that's not something that can continue indefinitely, right? Just like in a household, you can, spend more than you bring in over a certain amount of time, but you can't do that forever. And so we're working together as a campus community to say, okay, over the next 4 years, how do we bring our expenses and our revenues to meet? And there's really 3 things that we're focused on. One's recruiting and retention. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Second, I've talked about having this clear, intentional strategy, saying where we're going to foster excellence, and maybe some of the things we're not going to do anymore. And then simplifying our structure, saying, all right, how do we support the academic core, the core of this university in the most effective way? And how do we organize our university to be as simple, to be as integrated, to be as efficient as possible? And so we will do this over time, okay? I want to talk about, for a little bit, the third pillar here, which is recruit, retain, and graduate. So as you can see, we've already, before even I got started, I said, hey, I really want to understand what are we doing, right, to make sure that we're recruiting students effectively to this university. And you'll hear terms like brand and marketing get thrown around. And those are important terms, but those terms can be a little uncomfortable in higher ed, right? But this is not about glossy brochures, right? This is not about stuffing people's mailbox with postcards. This is about making sure that the perceptions of the University of Montana align with the reality of the University of Montana. Because when I'm on our campus, when I see what our faculty are doing, when I see what our students are doing, when I see what our alums are doing, I'm excited. I see the value from where I've spent the last 2 decades. I see the value in what UM is doing, and I see what a great place this is for young people to come as they enter this complex, dynamic world. But if the perceptions of the University of Montana from people outside of the campus and certainly outside of Missoula don't align with that reality, that's a problem. And we need to work to address it, and we are. So we're going to spend time, and we're going to have to commit some resources and structure ourselves to better communicate the value of a UM education to the right people through the right channels with the right frequency to bring more students here, right? Not just from a budget standpoint, but to give them the opportunity that many in this room have had to benefit from a UM education, okay? The second piece, though, is bringing in students isn't enough. The easiest students to recruit, frankly, are the ones that are already there. So we have to do a better job of retaining students. And our Provost Edmond is here, and this is something that she has kicked off in her time here, of how do we really build a framework for better retaining students. And this has to involve efforts in the classroom, but out of the classroom as well. And I'll tell you, the financial benefits of this, if we increase retention by 10 points, that's about a $4 million impact from a budget standpoint, little less than 4. So if we get our retention numbers to where we'd like them to be, financially, that's a huge benefit to the university. But more importantly, this is what matters. This is what transforms students' lives. Because a lot of students come to school at the University of Montana. They come from, maybe not a strong academic background. Maybe they come from a tribal college. Maybe they come from a reservation. That first year at any university is tough. All right, I know it was tough for me. I'm on my first day at West Point, I've joked a few times, but you get one of those tuberculosis tests. My first day, I prayed to God that night that said, please let that tuberculosis test come back positive so I can go home. So I think a lot of people have a tough time adjusting. And it can be a life-changing decision to say, hey, I tried that, college wasn't for me, I'm out. Or to say, you know what? I had somebody here that helped me out. They helped me through a tough situation. I stuck it out. I persisted. I graduated, and it changed my life. And we want more stories like the latter. I've been highlighting some things that some of our faculty members have done in this front, and we're going to focus on retention in a much more holistic way, in the classroom and out of the classroom, and making sure those efforts are as integrated as possible. All with the end of graduating students in a timely manner. And that's important for the state of Montana, for the city of Missoula, to have well-trained, well-educated people who are joining our workforce. You know, there's so many important aspects of this, but there is one component of that is economic growth in this state, right? And if you look at the facts of demographics in Montana over the next 10 years, about a quarter of our workforce will enter retirement age. That's about 126,000 people. Over that same time period, only about 90,000 will actually enter the workforce. So that's a gap right there. And most of those jobs require some degree of education beyond high school. So it's really important, not just for students, but for this state, that we do a great job here. And then the final piece is really making sure that in everything we do at the University of Montana, we embody the principle of mission first, but people always. Recognizing that we have a critically important mission. I've talked enough about that one. But we also have thousands of people that come to work over there at that campus every day. Some of you in this room, but I think probably everyone in this room either has worked at the University of Montana or has somebody in their family or their close friend network that has worked at the University of Montana. And it's critically important that the people that work at our university, people that have dedicated their lives to the vocation, the calling of higher ed, that they have a place where they can work, they can fulfill their full potential, and do the best work of their lives. And that means seeking and celebrating diversity. That means ensuring we have good professional and performance development processes in place. It's making sure that we have a safe, supportive environment for everyone that works at the university. It means ensuring that we're doing things to foster a strong culture, even stronger culture than we have already. And so you'll see a lot of the efforts that I will be focused on are ensuring that, yes, while our mission comes first, people always have to be at the forefront of what we do. Somebody asked me during my candidate forums when I was here, they said, well, you were in the military, then you were in this business, then you were in this business, you've done so many different things, like what are you about? I think was the gist of the question. And I said, you know what? Is my son, Davis, he said to me when I was working in the software business, he said, you know, Dad, have you just always been interested in trains? Have you just always wanted to do that? And I said, no, not at all, actually. And it set me back for a second, and maybe reevaluate what I was spending my life on. But when I thought about it, I thought, well, what do I actually like about this? Because I loved it, right? But what I loved was the people piece, right? Working with people, helping to make sure that we have an environment where people can reach their full potential and do the best work of their lives. And I think I've kind of concluded to myself, well, I'm in the people development business. And the University of Montana is absolutely a people development company, right? That's what we do. And that's not just our students, that's our employees as well. And so we're going to be very focused on that. And I think the slide that I'd leave you with is the slide that I could have started with, but the point that I think is probably the most important for this group is that this university and this city, this community, are inextricably linked. You know, as Missoula goes, so goes the University of Montana and vice versa. And I want to just thank this group for welcoming me here and for your commitment, for your partnership as we move forward and not just addressing these challenges, but leaning into some of the great opportunities that we have, that we're doing so as a unified community. Because this community makes the University of Montana so much better. And I believe the opposite is true as well. So I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for your commitment moving forward. I may have blown my time. I didn't check my time, but thanks, and I look forward to the questions. So.
Thank you, President Bodnar. Thank you very much. Table talk. First, introduce yourselves to each other at the table. Because we have a lot of questions to be asked, we're going to ask you to try to come up with your question very quickly at your table, but formulate a question that you would like to ask the president. Then pick somebody at your table to ask that question, and then once we get going, there will be 3 people walking around with microphones. Simply raise your hand. I think we're going to start on this side of the room and sort of work our way across on the questions. But introduce yourself and ask questions. I'd also like to say that President Bodnar would like to extend an invitation to everyone here at City Club to attend the 125th Charter Day Award Ceremony this Thursday, February 15th, beginning at 5 p.m. in the George and Jane Dennison Theater on the UM campus. It will be followed by to celebrate a 125-year reception at the Gilkey Executive Education Center in the Lady Grizz game versus Eastern Washington, complete with birthday cake for attendees. Come to campus to celebrate UM's 125th Charter Day.
Good afternoon. My name
Hi.
is Molly Davidson with Morris & Merrily. And our table as a group, we acknowledge the impediment of student loan debt, and we wanted to get your thoughts on how we can address this challenge for students.
You know, that is that's a tough one, just to be frank with you. And I think it's one that yeah, we're looking at in terms of what we can do from a waivers and a fees standpoint. I think, you know, we are working to be as efficient as we can at the university. I mean, I think we have, I don't want to get into a defense of whether college is too expensive or not, right? I think that's not going to be, you know, we could talk about whether our tuition's gone up too much or too little. But I think the way that you deal with student debt is to make sure that students over time get into successful careers that help them address that debt. I think from a societal standpoint, there are ways for students who enter service careers to address previous student loan debt. So helping make that more aware to students who maybe decide to enter a less lucrative career, one dedicated to service, to help provide ways through student services to help them to help find ways to offset or get loan forgiveness on that point. Other universities, more private universities with large endowments, have looked at student loan forgiveness in a much more holistic way. We're not going to do that as a state. I mean, our over the past 25 years, the level of state funding for you know, on a per student basis for education has decreased pretty substantially. I will say, though, over the most recent periods, we've held that pretty well. I mean, I give credit to the governor, to the legislature for supporting higher ed. But the longer term trend, if you look 25 years ago, the level of state support was nearly double what it is per student today. So that is an important thing, and I think supporting things, I'll just, you know, like the $6 million levy, re-up this fall, things to support continued state funding for the public good that is higher education. You know, we all benefit, right, from the positive externalities of having more graduates. So I think we owe it to those who are coming after us to continue to support higher ed. I think that's number one. And then number two is to help from a career services standpoint, either in getting into a good job or getting loan forgiveness if people choose a less lucrative, more service-oriented path. Yep.
I'm Frank Reed, and can you hear that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Our table talked quite a bit about resonating with the inextricable connection between the community and the university. And we're wondering how that might be better optimized. The overlap of those circles was not perhaps as great as it could be, and wondering how we might be able, and just a little unfair because you haven't been here very long, but just how we might be able to bridge that classic town gown issue that exists in all university towns. Thoughts on that?
Well, I think right off I'd say this is something that I would love this community's insight on. I mean, I do not, so my answer is probably about as good as anyone else's in this room at this point, right? I'm a month in. But I think there are, I'd say 4 things that I would say right off the bat. And we were talking a little bit about this at our table, but to have everyone in this, not just on our campus, but in this city, feel like we're rolling out the red carpet for students coming here, right? So on visits, right? So when you're visiting UM, you know, one of the things we're looking at, do you get a lanyard? Do you get, and this came from from the city council, actually, in some of our discussions, right? Do you get something that says, okay, you're here visiting parents and family, and you get a 10% discount at each of these businesses in the downtown area, right? And that when you see somebody wearing that lanyard, right, or having that affiliation, welcome, we're so excited to have you, right? That we all roll out the red carpet for students that are coming here. You know, and this is one of the discussions we had last week, because we all remember being 17 or 18-year-olds, like having all sorts of different thoughts and just bursting with insecurity coming out of our pores. And having somebody simply say to you, we're so glad you're here. We are so happy to have you, right? And we're going to work on that at the University of Montana, but in Missoula to do the same, I think would be really, really helpful to make everybody feel like you come to UM, you are part of a community. The second thing is I think making stronger ties from an internship standpoint. So, and that's for both groups. And something that I'm looking at, and we got to look at with our student services organizations to say, how are we making sure that our students are getting experiences in businesses or in organizations here in the community to supplement their classroom learning, number one, to help employers see new, young, exciting people, and to provide pathways for them to go after graduation. So I think that one's going to take us a little bit more time to develop. The third part is I want to make sure that we as a community, or excuse me, we as a university are providing enrichment opportunities for this community. So tonight we have a presidential lecture series. We have a wonderful, incredibly talented woman who's going to speak about the history of African American rights throughout the history of this country. That's a fantastic enrichment opportunity for this community. I'd encourage you all to participate, right? Not just when Pearl Jam comes or any of the various artists we have coming, but to have those events be something that the community benefits from and maybe supports too, right? We have a beautiful university as people come and visit this, and I'd love to bring in more people to enrich the discussion. It's funny, Chelsea, my wife, her grandparents retired here when she was in middle school, and you know, her grandfather, a World War II veteran in the Navy, is just the most. For those of you who know Jimmy Lander, he is 91. He seems like he's 70, right? He has this twinkle in his eye, and he would just, every time I was here, talk about how great it was to live in this town with the university. He'd tell me all the talks that he would go to and how it was so great for him. And I want to make sure that we're doing that for the community, and the community's participating in that. And then I think the final point is, you all, especially in this room, are talking about Missoula, you're talking about your businesses, you're traveling around. I want you to talk about the University of Montana too, outside of this place, and help us tell this story. Help us make the perception of this university in line with the reality, and help us make this university an attractive place that you're talking about with your customers, when you're on trips, okay? There's plenty more. I'd love your thoughts on it, but those are the 4 that I would highlight to begin with, but the list probably could go to 25.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Dusty with Blackfoot. Our table talked a lot about the different forms of adversity, and we're wondering if you have a strategy in place or in mind that kind of attacks that adversity. Some examples I'll give. Many of us have seen a shift in the perception of our brand as a university brand over about the last decade with some of the incidents that have happened. And some of the things that we talked about was thoughts on online education versus traditional education, shifts in perception of campus life, and then the faculty and program stability. So I'm just wondering if you had a strategy around the adversity around that.
All right. So Dustin, I think we might have an award winner for toughest question. And I guess this is one I don't want to. I think there's a lot in there. You mentioned a couple things. I heard you talk about, as we're dealing with some of our, challenges of the past, ways in which. I want to make sure I answer it. But so adversity, challenges in the past, how we're thinking about where we want to focus moving forward. Is that summarize it or just?
Really focus around our brand.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I think, and as we go through this process with what we're calling the University Planning Committee, we've done a lot of work over the last 2 years, right? We had something called the Strategic Planning Coordinating Committee, created a vision document. As many of you read, we had the APASP group, Academic Programs, Administrative Services Prioritization Task Force, that looked at all of our programs. As we bring those together here over the coming months, what I'm working with that group to do is say, all right, let's rearticulate, let's crystallize the mission of this university, and then let's say delineate those areas where we're going to focus on and drive excellence. So one example would be health and medicine. So if you think about this, lots of definitions of strategy. The best one I've read, it says effective strategy is strengths applied to greatest opportunities, right? So if you think about health and medicine, in Missoula we have a large population base, we have great medical facilities, and we have a large research institution. We don't have that really if you think about Montana, we don't have that anywhere else. That really doesn't exist anywhere from, you could debate this, right? But if you think about it between Seattle, Minneapolis, and Salt Lake, that's an area of strength, right? So there's others, right? That's just one. I don't want to say that's our only one, but that's an area of strength. So how do we really identify with that and make sure that we're supporting that we're emphasizing that and building on that area? There could be others. And I think as we go through, when we talk about a clear, intentional strategic plan, it is saying where do we want to focus and why, and how do we make sure that we're driving excellence in those areas, right? So I think that's the first thing. I'd say campus life in general, obviously every college campus has to make sure that it's a safe, supportive environment for their students. And the issue of sexual assault, sexual harassment more broadly is one with which this community has a painful history, right? I think the good news of that is that through the work of many incredibly dedicated, hardworking people, the University of Montana has been a leader and an example for other institutions in terms of education, prevention, response policies. And that's something that every college campus across this country, every community across this country has to focus on. And our work's never done. And so what we're doing is continuing to build upon that to make sure that we are doing everything in our power to make this campus safe, to make it a supportive environment. But more broadly speaking, I do want to look at our student life and say, all right, how do we, because somebody asked me about, the Kaiman asked me, well, we need to refurbish our dorms and we need to have these new facilities, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that's true, but we're not going to build a lazy river at the University of Montana, right? You'd have to ice skate on it in the winter anyway. But we are going to make sure that we're investing in facilities to enhance the student experience. So there's, Scott Wittenberg's in the back here. One of the things he's looked at is a Lassaud Institute in one of our dorms that encourages, entrepreneurship in learning in our residence halls. So things like that we can work to build upon that student experience to ensure that learning is happening not just in the classroom but elsewhere is I think a very rich area for investigation for us. Sorry, long answer, but yeah.
Got another one here, maybe a little shorter. You've been here a month,
Yes.
on the job. Obviously a lot of homework prior to that. What was it that surprised you the most about coming here, good or bad, I guess, and how do you propose to address it in terms of your goals and the things you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I think I'd take one good and maybe one, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I'd say on the unequivocally good side, the passion for this place. The passion for the University of Montana from everyone that's not just on campus, but in this community and around the country. I mean, I've been in a lot of places with a strong culture where people love their organization, whether that's been West Point or the Army or even GE. I'd tell you the passion for the University of Montana has been a pleasant surprise. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that, but I tell you, this university has an incredible asset in that regard. I think and I wouldn't say it's really a surprise as much just more of a confirmation. And that is the kind of difficulty of stepping into a leadership role in any public institution in this country at this time. The level of maybe distrust of people in roles, whether it's in government or a public institution, is really high, right? And so the reactions to things you say, the perceptions, like I like to say I like to operate from a assumption of positive intentions. And I think for leaders across the board and a lot of public institutions, there's understandably a level of distrust and an importance on not just transparency, but rapid, quick communications. And we're trying to make sure that we do that because I firmly believe that, look, this institution has to be clear, it has to be transparent. But that requires a lot of hard work and effort in terms of how and what you communicate when and to whom and how you sequence that. Because I want to make sure our community doesn't hear things from the TV stations or the newspaper. They hear things from me. And so communicating the complexity and difficulty of communicating and meeting those objectives is tougher than I thought, because you sit there and think, hey, we're trying to do this, and the perceptions is very different from maybe what you're actually trying to do. So making sure that we're very intentional and we're doing that in as effective way as we can. I think the importance of that has been not necessarily a surprise, but something that has been an important learning in the first month. Sir?
Hi, my name is Matthew Olson. I'm from the Mansfield Center.
Yeah, hi Matthew.
Our question from our table was, and you've answered a couple of them already, but where do you plan on taking calculated risks and making investments in programs to build a platform that encourages local community growth, leadership development, specifically around health and medicine, which you talked about briefly, international market development for the community here, and also entrepreneurship, which you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. That's one that I'd love this community's input on. And I'll point to Scott. He's still in the back. He hasn't left yet. So Scott is our vice president for research and is very focused on innovation and working with the community. So he has an initiative called Innovate UM, and that's with Montech, that's with other organizations. I mean, it's in collaboration with Blackfoot actually as well. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in that regard. I think, look, it's no accident that Silicon Valley grew up around Stanford, right? And we have a lot of great technology in this city. And we have a great university. And one of the things I'd like to investigate, build upon what's happened already, but how do we nurture, how do we catalyze that ecosystem in the most effective way that we can. I don't know all the answers to that yet, but I think that's something that, and we've talked about it with the city council, with the county commissioners, from a research standpoint, but from a university more broadly standpoint is how, because that's going to be important not just for this community, but part of we have young kids that we're hoping to graduate from Hellgate. Maybe some of them come here. We'd love them to live here, right? And we want to spur opportunities for them. So I don't know if it's as much of a calculated risk per se as a focus on how are we as a university catalyzing that ecosystem here in Missoula.
Hey, Seth. So over the past few years, or several years actually, across higher education and at the University of Montana, we've seen an increased reliance on adjunct professors rather than tenure-track professor positions. Do you think that's the best model moving forward with the idea of pupil development?
That is I wouldn't tell you that I have the right answer to that question. A month in, I think it is a tough one, to be frank with you. I don't know what the right percentage is, and because we have, and there's probably some studies out there, I'd defer to the provost for more of a detailed answer. I think our adjuncts, our lecturers, do a phenomenal job. They are on the front line, so to speak, with students. In fact, one of the stories that I've told at our campus forums was of one of our faculty members who is a lecturer. And there was a young woman who was taking this professor's anatomy class and had the news of her mother had just been diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer. Didn't have really much time to live. And this young woman, her family said, you need to come home. You need to withdraw. You need to be with your mom. And she went around with her withdrawal paperwork to all of her professors. She got to Dr. Lori Minns' office, and Dr. Minns could see she was upset, sat her down and said, can we talk about what's going on? And console her as best you can in a situation like that. And helped her through it and said, hey, we'll be here for you. But then she went a step further, and she wrote this young woman's mother a note. And she said, I can't imagine what you're going through right now. I'm a mother myself. But I've had your daughter in my class. She's an amazing woman. You must be incredibly proud. And I want you to know that here at the University of Montana, we're going to support her. We're going to be there for her, and we will help her through this. And that's what great faculty do. In fact, I got an email from that young woman just a week ago, and we're going to meet. I'm going to see her next week, and we're going to sit down and say, how you doing? I think it's next week. I'm trying to get it on my calendar, which has been a little busy. But so when we talk about faculty, and I know there's been a lot, hey, lecturers versus tenured. In fact, the importance is we have great faculty of all labor classifications at this university. We need to make sure they're all successful. And so I don't know that there's a right percentage to think about this. I think as we talk about budget challenges, we need to talk in terms of programs, not in terms of classes of employees. And that's where we're going to be focused.
Hi, as a Missoula native, I'm Mark Reinsel with Apex Engineering. As a Missoula native but a Montana State University graduate, I get to ask you this question. How do you see UM's relationship with MSU going forward? Do you see it being collaborative, competitive, combative?
Yeah. Well, it has to be collaborative. Look, when I got this, was selected, one of the first people I sent a box to was Waded over at MSU, and I sent her actually some mugs. I see Dorothea here from Cafe Dolce, some black coffee, some other Missoula treats that actually Eric went around and helped me pull together, my father-in-law. And I sent her a note and I said, look, on the football field, on basketball court, on the track, in athletics, we're always going to be rivals, right? That's a zero-sum game, They're going to be here in a couple of weeks, and we're hoping for a big sweep from a basketball standpoint. But everywhere else, we ought to be partners. Montana is not big enough to have universities that are competing against each other duplicatively and inefficiently. So we are the state flagship research university, right? We have a task. They're a land-grant university, right? They have tasks. If a young person says, hey, I want to be an architect, go to MSU, right? I want to be a civil engineer, go to MSU, right? If I want to be a doc, I'd say come to UM, right? Now there are programs over there, so there are places where we might, have competitive programs, but we each are players within a system. And that system has to be as efficient as it possibly can. We need to make sure that we're using every single dollar that we get from the legislature as a system as effectively as we can.
We normally end this at 1 o'clock, but a lot of people here I know have questions, and the president is going to have to leave here fairly quickly.
Yep.
But if you would, if anyone who needs to leave right now, go ahead, and we'll take maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll call it a day. So turn it back to you, and the next question.
All right.
It'll come from over here.
Yep.
I'll take some time if that's possible.
Yeah.
We recognize and are super excited about your vision of agility and innovation within the University of Montana, and we're embracing that. Our concern and our question to you is how you're going to accomplish that within the constraints of traditional academia, the bureaucracy, the culture around an industry that is notoriously slow to move and change.
Yeah. I think that's a hard question, right? And because these are not easy decisions, right? As we think about where we're going to focus, these are people's careers, right? In some ways, right? When we talk about programs and prioritization, those are tough. But it has to be done collaboratively, right? And so I had a meeting today with some of our faculty leaders, some of our faculty union leaders, and just how do we make sure that we're working together collaboratively for the best interest of this university, right? This can't be, one model says, all right, new person comes in, take all the work's been done, go into my office, draw up what the strategy should be, and let's go. That'd be completely arrogant of me to do. Also, it just wouldn't be ineffective. So I think we have to align on a shared vision for our future. That's never easy, but it's the only way for us to do this together. Any others? Oh, looks like we've got, okay. I'll let the mic, I won't call, I'll let the microphone hostlers.
Hi, welcome to Missoula. I wanted you to address retention a little bit more deeply, if you would. And a former dean of the College of Arts and Sciences wonders about using former employees, retired employees from the university, to do advising and to be mentors to students. I do think MSU has a program where they're really following the students along. And as we read about Tulane yesterday, it was alumni and retirees reaching out to students before they even came to the university. As an academic advisor there for 24 years, I know about the struggles that students go through, and they need good people to turn to and talk to in those times. So I'm curious what your ideas are. I'm Senator Sue Malik, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Madam Senator. I think that's a great idea, frankly. And we've talked, we have Jed Liston left, our head of alumni. We've already talked to Jed quite a bit on the recruiting standpoint. Say, hey, look, we only have 4 recruiters. We don't have unlimited dollars to send people around, but we've got a lot of engaged, active alumni that want to help on the recruiting side. I think doing so on the retention side is also very, very beneficial. I think we have to make sure we do so in a coordinated way. And I look to our provost and look to some of our student engagement leaders to help on that front. But I'd tell you, our student affairs group is really looking at student wellness and student success in a more holistic way. And I think that's a key component that I'd love to explore. We have to find the right vehicle through which to get a modicum of training, right? So how are we doing that? And we want to make sure we're careful in how we would do something like that. But yeah, this whole community can support young people or people of any age, frankly, as they're navigating their education. I'm going to ask Beverly to take that note for us to make sure we look into it.
Hey, I'm Nancy Picard, and I just wanted to know, what is ideal enrollment in your mind, both graduate and undergraduate? How are you going to get there, and when are you going to get there?
Yeah. Great question. You know, I don't have that number in my head. What I would tell you is we have success from enrollment is not just having one more student than MSU. Or, I mean, there's a right size to this university. It's probably a few thousand students than we have right now. A few thousand more than we have right now. We're not going to get there overnight. We're laying out a 4-year plan with certain enrollment targets baked into that plan to drive the revenue that we have. But unfettered, endless growth is not where we're aiming, right? Yeah, there isn't enough parking. But it is part of something that I'm working through. I mean, I'm a month in, and I've asked that question, and I think I don't have the full answer yet. But we're gonna work through that over the coming months, and really over the coming couple of years. I mean, right now we're focused on going out and talking to students, focused on a blitz for fall of 2018 to get as many students here as we can. And I don't think we have a ceiling on the number for fall of 2018, but there is I think a level at which we're steady state, but it's a few thousand more than we have right now. But it's a good question. I don't have the exact answer for you yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. The president needs to leave. His scheduler is saying that he has another appointment he's going to be late for.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for attending.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Hey, and all of you know somebody, just like all of you know somebody that works at UM, all of you know somebody that's thinking about coming to UM. I want you all to send one text. That's my one ask, right? Send one text or one email to a high school student that's thinking about college, whether it's a junior or senior. This is my one ask as you leave. Send a note. Said, hey, UM's a great place to go. UM is somewhere that I see what they're doing. Send a note. That's my one ask. It can make all the difference in the world. Okay? Thank you, everybody.
Please remember for our next March 12th program, Schoolhouse Talk, deploying the public investment in our schools. Missoula County Public Schools is deploying the voters' $158 million investment in capital improvements citywide, the largest voter-improved bond issue in Montana history. At the same time, the school system, which currently makes up about 30% of local tax bills, will place a levy before the voters in May. MCPS Superintendent Mark Thane and Business Manager Pat McHugh will walk us through how the bond dollars are being spent and how state and federal budget cuts will impact the budget and, in turn, the potential impact of those cuts on our property taxes. March 12th, the next City Forum.